The member for McMahon.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Despite the Treasurer's talk, isn't it the case that the tax-to-GDP ratio is now higher than at any time than under the former Labor government? Isn't this just another example of the government being all talk and no action?
The member for Deakin will cease interjecting. The Treasurer has the floor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for his question on tax. And I thank him for the question on tax, Mr Speaker, because it gives me the opportunity to talk about tax policies that those opposite have described. And if I go to the statement by the member for McMahon, he says that their policies on negative gearing and capital gains tax are sensible, moderate and well thought-out policy. And it made me think, when was the last time that the Shadow Treasurer and the member for McMahon once described policies in those terms? And if you go back to a famous policy of his called Fuel Watch, Mr Speaker, what he described is he described it as a sensible, thought-out plan, Mr Speaker. He said, when we put our plans out there, and we put our plans for Fuel Watch out there, which all the objective evidence indicates puts downward pressure on fuel prices by about 2 cents a litre at a cost of $20 million. He said Fuel Watch is a very good plan. It's a very good plan. We've put out our plan. It brings down petrol prices. And this is the bit I like. He said this about Fuel Watch. He said, you've got to have a bit of credibility about this. You've got to weigh up the value of these plans, Mr Speaker. But, you know, he didn't stop there. He didn't stop at Fuel Watch, Mr Speaker. He went through any number of other plans, Mr Speaker. Grocery Watch. Do we remember Grocery Watch? Do we remember Grocery Watch?
Treasurer will just resume his seat for a second. The member for Rankin is warned. I just draw the Treasurer's attention to some earlier rulings I've made with respect to relevance. It's within order for ministers to draw analogies, but as I've said, it's in the interest of direct relevance in the House that they remain on the policy topic. And whilst it's fine to draw an analogy, I'm listening very closely. The analogy can't be the whole answer. Members on my left.
Government, remember what? A carbon tax, Mr Speaker. A carbon tax, Mr Speaker. Go through their tax reform plan. You remember this one? The Henry Review. Let's go through it. 135 recommendations. Sorry, there was 138. There was 138. And if I go through them, 1, no, they didn't do that. 2, didn't do that. I can keep going, but then I came to one that they actually decided to do. It was the only one. What was it? It was recommendation 45. It was the mining tax, Mr Speaker. The mining tax. And it was going to raise billions and billions. It was going to build speaks and all.
Treasurer will resume his seat. Members on both sides will cease interjecting. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I raise a point of order under Standing Order 91C and 91E. You gave a very specific direction to the Treasurer.
No, the Manager of Opposition Business.
A very specific direction.
And the Leader of the House, if he wishes to address the point of order, I will always allow him to do so, but he needs to come to the dispatch box. Okay, the Treasurer will resume his seat. I haven't called the Treasurer. If the Manager of Opposition Business listened to my previous ruling, I was referring to the non-tax elements of the Treasurer's answer. So the Treasurer is on the topic of tax, and I'm still listening very closely.
I'd like to talk about the taxes they had in government, Mr Speaker. And of course, the mining tax was going to build all sorts of things, fund all sorts of promises, but as the member for Lilly knows, it didn't raise much money at all, did it? It was one of the amazing taxes that couldn't even raise any revenue, Mr Speaker. Oh, here he comes, Zoolander.
The member for McMahon will resume his seat. The Treasurer will resume his seat. Everyone can resume their seat, just for a second. The member for McMahon I will recognise on a point of order, but I'm warning him he will not come to the dispatch box and give directions.
Mr. Speaker.
The Treasurer and the Leader of
Mr.
the
Speaker,
Treasurer and the Leader of the House.
on a point
will
of
cease
order,
interjecting.
on direct relevance, the question was about tax to
I haven't
GDP
called the
ratio
member for-
under his tenure. If he doesn't know the answer, he should say so and sit
The
down.
member for McMahon will resume his seat. That was not a point of order.
Which was their tax plans, Mr. Speaker. There was also, of course, the bank deposit tax, which the member opposite was the architect of. That was another careful, well-thought-out plan, Mr. Speaker. And of course, there was their plan to tax people's cars, Mr. Speaker, which they put before the election, as the member opposite did, and we had to abolish when we came into
The
government.
member for Griffith will resume.